The lecture hall fell silent as Professor Vex'thalan's third eye flickered with what we all recognized as barely contained irritation. Not the kind you'd show to a superior, mind you, more like the slow burn annoyance you feel when someone's chewing too loudly during your favorite holovid. The human exchange student, a small creature named Keiko Martinez, had raised her hand for the 5th time in 20 minutes, and frankly the rest of us were starting to wonder if this was some sort of elaborate prank her species was playing on the Galactic Academy. "Yes, Miss Martinez." Vex'thalan's voice dripped with the kind of patience usually reserved for explaining basic mathematics to particularly dense asteroids. "What is it this time?" Keiko stood up, which, let me tell you, was adorable in the worst possible way. She barely reached the chest height of most Vex'thalan students and cleared her throat. "Professor, I have to interrupt again because you keep saying things that are, well, fundamentally wrong about Earth." Oh, here we go. The professor's scales shifted to a pale orange, which for those of you unfamiliar with Xenthari biology, roughly translates to, "Are you fucking kidding me right now?" But being a professional educator with 17 advanced degrees, Vex'thalan simply folded all 4 of his arms and sighed, a long wheezing sigh that seemed to deflate his entire thorax. "Miss Martinez," he began, his tone suggesting he'd rather be literally anywhere else in the galaxy. "I have spent the better part of 3 decades studying Deathworld species. I have personally cataloged over 47 Category 9 and above planetary environments. I think I know a bit more about your homeworld than you, a first-year student might presume." The other students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Well, those of us with seats anyway. My species doesn't really do the whole sitting thing, but you get the idea. We all knew where this was going. We'd all heard stories about humans, those terrifying bipedal omnivores from the 3rd planet of an unremarkable yellow star. But seeing one in person was another thing entirely. She looked so harmless, soft, vulnerable, like she might break if you breathed on her too hard. That should have been our first clue, really. "With all due respect, Professor," Keiko said, and I swear I heard at least 3 of my classmates' breathing apparatuses wheeze in second-hand anxiety. "You just told the entire class that Earth's gravity is moderately high, and that our atmospheric pressure is somewhat elevated. You also said our predators are reasonably dangerous, and that human endurance is above average for mammalian species." Vex'thalan blinked his primary eyes slowly. "Yes, and these are factual statements based on extensive research, and Earth's gravity is 1.23 times what the GFC considers standard," Keiko interrupted, pulling out her datapad with a speed that made half the class flinch. "Our atmospheric pressure is 1.4 times standard. Our planet is literally classified as a Category 12 Deathworld. That's the highest rating before you hit uninhabitable nightmare fuel territory. And you're teaching an entire classroom of future xenobiologists that these conditions are merely moderate?" The silence that followed was the kind you usually experience right before someone's about to say something catastrophically stupid. Professor Vex'thalan opened his mouth, all 3 of them, because Xenthari have backup mouths for important occasions, and then closed them again, twice. I glanced over at my study partner, a Quilnari named Jemzin Cole, whose sensory tendrils had gone completely rigid with fascination. This was better than any lecture we'd attended all semester, and trust me, we'd sat through Professor Keln's infamous 5-hour dissertation on crystalline-based life forms. Wait, no, I'm not supposed to say that word. His 5-hour dissertation on silicon-based life forms. Whatever. Furthermore, Keiko continued, and oh boy, she was on a roll now. "You mentioned that Earth has a variety of predatory species that posed significant challenges to early humans. Professor, we had to fight our way to the top of the food chain against animals that could run faster than our fastest sprinters, creatures with claws that could disembowel us with a single swipe, and apex predators whose entire evolutionary purpose was hunting mammals exactly our size." "Yes, well," Vex'thalan attempted. "We're not even the strongest species on our planet, Professor. Not by a long shot. We've got land animals that weigh over 6,000 kilograms of pure muscle, ocean creatures that grow to 30 meters in length, insects that can lift 50 times their own body weight, and we're somehow the dominant species despite being slower, weaker, and squishier than literally hundreds of other Earth organisms." Another student, I think it was Ryla, a Corvinite with particularly impressive facial frills, raised one of her secondary appendages timidly. How did your species survive?" Keiko turned to her with a smile that somehow managed to be both friendly and absolutely terrifying. We outlasted them, every single one. We can run longer than anything else on our planet. We can track prey for days without stopping. We can eat things that would poison most other species. We can survive in deserts where the temperature hits 50 degrees Celsius, in tundras where it drops to -40, in jungles so humid you can barely breathe, and in mountain ranges where the air is so thin you'd pass out from oxygen deprivation. Surely that's an exaggeration. Professor Vex'thalan tried again. Professor, humans have literally run ultra-marathons. That's over 100 miles, by the way, in Death Valley, one of the hottest places on Earth, just for fun. For recreational purposes, we do this willingly. Some of us pay money to do it. The collective horror that rippled through the lecture hall was palpable. I'm pretty sure at least 2 students made religious gestures of protection. Jem'Zan's tendrils had now curled into what I recognized as their species equivalent of nope. Absolutely not, I'm out. Keiko wasn't finished. And about that endurance thing. You said above average for mammalian species, but that's like saying a supernova is somewhat bright. Humans are literally the best endurance runners in the entire animal kingdom of Earth. There are tribes who still practice persistence hunting. That's where you just follow an animal, for hours, sometimes days, until it literally dies from exhaustion, because it can't sweat like we can, because its body overheats and shuts down while we're still going strong. That's Vex'thalan's scales had gone from orange to a sickly pale green, which I'm pretty sure meant something along the lines of, I'm regretting every life choice that led me to this moment. Horrifying. Yeah, I know, Keiko said cheerfully. But here's the really fun part, and I cannot stress this enough. Everything I just described, that's normal Earth stuff. That's baseline human capability. That's not even getting into what happens when we actually try to push our limits. A brave soul in the back, I think his name was Dorthan, a Mixalok with more courage than sense, called out. What happens when humans push their limits? Keiko's eyes lit up with an enthusiasm that made me genuinely concerned for everyone's safety. Oh, I'm so glad you asked. See, when humans are faced with extreme stress, particularly when someone we care about is in danger, our bodies release these chemicals called adrenaline and noradrenaline. Our heart rate spikes. Our pain receptors essentially turn off, our strength increases by anywhere from 50 to 100%, and we enter what's colloquially known as hysterical strength mode. That sounds medically inadvisable, Ryla whispered. Oh, it absolutely is. We can tear our own muscles, break our own bones, and cause severe internal damage, but in that moment, we don't feel it. There are documented cases of human mothers lifting vehicles, actual motorized vehicles weighing over 1,000 kilograms off their trapped children, completely untrained civilians performing feats of strength that should be physically impossible. And here's the kicker. We usually don't even remember doing it afterward, because our brain literally suppresses the memory to protect us from the psychological trauma of realizing what we're capable of. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Professor Vex'thalan seemed to have run out of counter-arguments, his 3 mouths hanging slightly open in what I can only describe as existential dread. So, Keiko continued, and I swear she was enjoying this way too much. When you tell this class that humans have above-average endurance and come from a moderately challenging environment, you're not just understating things, Professor. You're actively misleading future xenobiologists, who might one day encounter my species in the field and think, oh, humans, those are the moderate ones, I can totally handle this. And then they're going to be very surprised when we accidentally intimidate them just by existing. Miss Martinez, Vex'thalan finally managed, his voice barely above a wheeze. Are you suggesting that my entire curriculum on Deathworlder species requires I'm suggesting that maybe, just maybe, when you have an actual human in your classroom, you might want to, I don't know, ask them about their lived experience, instead of relying solely on academic papers written by species who've never actually visited Earth because it's too dangerous for most biological safety ratings. And that's when I realized something terrifying. She had a point. A really, really good point. The kind of point that makes you question everything you thought you knew about galactic xenobiology, and whether your professors actually knew what they were talking about, or if they'd just been repeating the same sanitized information for decades, because the truth was too scary to admit. Professor Vex'thalan slumped in his chair. Well, his species equivalent of slumping, which looked more like a controlled deflation, and gestured weakly at Keiko. Fine, fine. You've made your point. Would you like to take over this portion of the lecture? The human's face split into a grin that showed way too many teeth for comfort, and I mentally added, human smiling, to my growing list of things that were simultaneously adorable and deeply unsettling. I thought you'd never ask. Keiko Martinez walked to the front of the lecture hall, with the kind of confidence that made you forget she was barely 5 feet tall and weighed less than most species' standard luggage allowance. Professor Vex'thalan retreated to a corner seat, looking like he needed a very strong drink and possibly a career change, while the rest of us watched in morbid fascination as a first-year student prepared to teach a class on her own species. All right, class, she began, pulling up a holographic display that showed Earth rotating in all its blue and green glory. Let me tell you what they don't put in the textbooks because it's too insane to believe unless you've actually lived it. She tapped the display, and the image zoomed in on various regions of Earth. First things first, let's talk about Earth's biodiversity. We have approximately 8.7 million species sharing our planet. Not had, have, currently, right now, and here's the fun part. Humans have tried to kill ourselves with literally thousands of them, either accidentally or on purpose, and we're still here. A student near the front, I think her name was Thessia, a voidborn with excellent note-taking appendages, raised a claw hesitantly. When you say tried to kill yourselves, you mean as a species-wide survival challenge, yes? Oh no, I mean individually. For entertainment. We have entire television programs dedicated to watching humans interact with the most dangerous animals on Earth. There's this one guy who spent decades grabbing venomous snakes with his bare hands while shouting enthusiastically about how beautiful they were. Became one of the most beloved humans on the entire planet. We built statues of him. The collective intake of breath and various other gas exchange reactions was almost musical in its horror. But let's move past the animal kingdom for a second. Keiko continued, clearly enjoying herself far too much. Let's talk about human history, because that's where things get really interesting. See, Earth doesn't just have dangerous wildlife, it has dangerous everything. We've survived ice ages where glaciers covered half our planet, volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun for years, asteroid impacts that would have sterilized most worlds, plagues that killed off a third of our population, and every single time, we just adapted and kept going. She pulled up images of various human civilizations, and I had to admit, the architecture was impressive if you ignored the fact that most of it was built in places where no sane species would establish settlements. This is Machu Picchu, Keiko said, pointing to stone structures perched on what looked like a near-vertical mountainside, built by the Inca civilization at an altitude of 2,400 meters above sea level, where oxygen levels are significantly reduced. Just casually constructed an entire city on a mountain because, why not? This is Venice, an entire city built on wooden stilts in a lagoon that floods regularly. This is Dubai, a metropolis we built in a desert where summer temperatures regularly exceed 50 degrees Celsius. And this is Oymyakon, Russia, a permanent settlement in one of the coldest inhabited places on Earth, where winter temperatures drop to minus 70 degrees Celsius. Minus 70? Jemson's translator seemed to struggle with the number, like it couldn't quite believe the input. Yep, and people live there, by choice. They raise families there. They go to work, they go to school. They have birthday parties and festivals, and normal daily life in conditions that would kill most galactic species within minutes. Professor Vex'thalan made a sound that might have been a whimper. But here's where it gets really wild, Keiko said, her enthusiasm somehow increasing. Humans don't just survive our environment, we actively seek out danger for recreational purposes. We climb mountains that can kill us just to see the view from the top. We strap ourselves to boards and slide down snow-covered slopes at high speeds. We jump out of perfectly functional aircraft with nothing but a fabric parachute. We throw ourselves off bridges attached to elastic cords. We cage dive with apex predators. We free dive to depths that should collapse our lungs. We run into burning buildings to save strangers. We do all of this willingly, enthusiastically, and we consider it fun. Why? The question came from at least 7 students simultaneously, in various languages and frequencies. Keiko paused, seeming to genuinely consider the question. Honestly? Because we can. Because we're curious. Because we're competitive. Because someone said it was impossible, and humans have this pathological need to prove people wrong. We've got a saying on Earth, because it's there. That's literally the reason one of our most famous mountaineers gave for why he wanted to climb Mount Everest, the tallest mountain on our planet, where hundreds of people have died trying to reach the summit. Because it's there. That's it. That's the whole justification. She switched the display to show various human sporting events, and I watched in growing alarm as humans did things like hurl themselves down icy tracks at speeds exceeding 100 kilometers per hour, fight each other in sanctioned combat sports, and chase a ball around a field with such intensity that injuries were just considered part of the game. We even have something called extreme sports, Keiko continued, which is basically humans looking at regular sports and thinking, you know what, this isn't dangerous enough, let's add fire, or height, or speed, or all three. There are humans who surf waves taller than buildings, humans who ski down near vertical cliff faces, humans who race motorcycles at speeds that would be illegal on most civilized planets, and we celebrate these people. We give them medals and sponsorships and put them on our breakfast cereal boxes. Ryla's frills had gone completely flat against her head, which I'd learned was the Corvinite equivalent of I can't process this information and might need to reboot my entire worldview. Now, let's talk about human pain tolerance, Keiko said, and I swear half the class collectively tensed. Because this is where things get medically fascinating. Human pain receptors are actually quite sensitive. We feel pain just fine, thank you very much. But we've got this weird ability to just ignore it when we need to. There are documented cases of humans finishing marathons on broken legs, soldiers continuing to fight with injuries that should have incapacitated them, and athletes completing competitions with concussions, fractures, and internal bleeding. That's not biologically possible, Thessia protested weakly. And yet, we do it anyway. There's this runner named Gabriella Anderson who finished an Olympic marathon despite being severely dehydrated and suffering from heat exhaustion. She was literally staggering, falling, barely able to stand, and she still crossed that finish line. Because quitting wasn't an option in her mind. Her body was shutting down, and her brain just said, nope, we're finishing this. Keiko pulled up medical diagrams that made several students look away. Here's another fun fact. Humans are one of the few species that can consciously override our own survival instincts. Our brain is literally designed with the ability to say, I know you're screaming at me to stop, body, but we're doing this anyway. It's why we can hold our breath past the point of comfort, push our muscles past their safety limits, and function through injuries that would force most species into involuntary hibernation states. Is there anything humans can't do? Dorthan asked, sounding somewhere between amazed and terrified. Oh, tons of things, Keiko said cheerfully. We can't photosynthesize, we can't echolocate, we can't see ultraviolet light, we can't regenerate limbs, we can't survive in vacuum, we can't breathe underwater, the list goes on. But here's the thing, we don't let that stop us. We build technology to do what our biology can't. We invented submarines to explore the oceans, spacesuits to survive in vacuum, sonar to map what we can't see, prosthetics that are sometimes better than our original limbs. If we can't do something naturally, we just engineer a solution and do it anyway. She paused, her expression turning more serious. And that brings me to the most important thing you need to understand about humans, the thing that makes us actually dangerous. We don't give up, ever. It's not in our nature. You can knock us down, and we'll get back up. You can destroy our cities, and we'll rebuild them. You can tell us something is impossible, and we'll take that as a challenge. We've got this concept called spite-based motivation, where we'll accomplish incredible things purely because someone said we couldn't. The lecture hall had gone so quiet you could hear the environmental systems humming. Every student was completely transfixed, and I realized with a start that I was leaning forward, hanging on every word despite my species not technically having the skeletal structure for leaning. There's a human saying, Keiko continued, her voice dropping to something almost reverent, per aspera ad astra. It's Latin, one of our old languages, and it means through hardships to the stars. That's basically our species' motto. We didn't get to join the Galactic Federation because we were invited. We got here because we clawed our way up from a death world, survived everything our planet threw at us, developed faster than light travel through sheer stubborn determination, and showed up at your doorstep saying, "Hi, we're here. We'd like to join. Please don't shoot." Professor Vex'thalan let out a sound that might have been a laugh or possibly a sob. It was hard to tell. So when you're writing papers about Deathworlders, Keiko said, looking directly at the professor, maybe don't soften the language to make it seem more palatable. Don't say moderately high gravity. Say gravity that would crush most species. Don't say reasonably dangerous predators. Say apex predators that hunted humans for millions of years and only lost because we learned to throw sharp sticks really accurately. Don't say above average endurance. Say pursuit predators who can literally run prey to death and think it's a fun weekend activity. She smiled, that terrifying, adorable smile again. Because here's the thing. Humans are only scary if you're not prepared for us. If you understand what we are, where we come from, and what we're capable of, then we're just people. Weird people from a horrifying death world who make questionable life choices and have an unhealthy obsession with caffeine and spicy food, but still just people. And we're actually pretty friendly once you get past the whole apex predator thing. Keiko returned to her seat, and the lecture hall remained silent for a long moment. Finally, Professor Vex'thalan stood up, his scales having returned to their normal blue-green color, and cleared all three of his throats. Well, he said slowly, I believe that was educational. Miss Martinez, you've given us all much to think about. Class dismissed. Please review chapters 12 through 15 for next session, where we will apparently be rewriting everything we thought we knew about Deathworld classifications. As we filed out of the lecture hall, I heard students whispering nervously, saw several making notes to avoid antagonizing the human exchange student, and watched at least one person change their route to avoid walking too close to Keiko in the corridor. But me, I approached her directly, my curiosity overriding my species' natural sense of self-preservation. That was incredible, I told her honestly. Terrifying, but incredible. Keiko laughed, a sound that I was starting to recognize as genuinely happy rather than threatening, though the distinction was subtle. Thanks. I've been waiting all semester to do that. Professor Vex keeps treating Earth like it's just slightly worse than average, and it was driving me crazy. Question, I ventured. Is everything you said actually true? The running animals to death, the lifting vehicles, the living in -70 degrees. Every word, she confirmed. Want to see videos? I've got hundreds of hours of documentation of humans doing absolutely insane things. There's this whole genre of Earth entertainment called fail compilations, where we just watch each other get hurt doing stupid stunts and laugh about it. Your species is insane. Yeah, Keiko agreed happily. Yeah, we really are, but we're also pretty great once you get used to us. Come on, I'll buy you whatever passes for coffee in the cafeteria and show you some highlights of human stupidity. Fair warning though, some of it is pretty graphic. As I followed the tiny human Deathworlder toward the cafeteria, I reflected on how my understanding of the galaxy had fundamentally shifted in the course of a single lecture. Humans weren't moderately dangerous. They were absolutely terrifying, and somehow, that made them even more fascinating. Behind us, I heard Professor Vex'thalan talking to another instructor, his voice carrying down the corridor. I'm taking a sabbatical, maybe several. I need to rethink my entire career. Jemson caught up with us, their tendrils still twitching with nervous energy. Can I join you? I have so many questions about human biology that I'm not sure I want answered, but also desperately need to know. Keiko's grin widened. Oh, this is going to be fun. Did I mention that humans can train their bodies to digest literal poison? Because we absolutely can, and some of us do it just to win eating contests. Eating contests. Jemson and I asked simultaneously. Oh boy, Keiko said gleefully. Do I have stories for you? And that, my friends, is how I learned that the most dangerous thing about humans isn't their strength, their endurance, or their Deathworld adaptations. It's their enthusiasm for sharing exactly how insane their species is, delivered with such cheerful pride that you can't help but want to learn more even as every survival instinct is screaming at you to run away. But I didn't run. None of us did. Because if there's one thing humans taught the Galactic Academy that day, it's that sometimes the most terrifying things are also the most worth understanding. And maybe, just maybe, having a human on your side isn't such a bad thing after all. Even if they do willingly eat peppers that cause chemical burns just for fun. I'm still processing that one.